Okay, we're going to look at what we call the log wheels, and they can be quite useful, but they have a very specific function and a very specific way of doing things. First, I need to expose my log wheels. By default, you have the primary color wheels exposed, and I have these three icons in the upper right of the wheels window: a target, 3 bars, and log. The target is the primary color wheels, currently exposed. The bars are the RGB corrections. Here we can work entirely within the red, green, or blue channels, or with the brightness channel, not unlike we did beforehand with the curves. And then the third one along is log, and these are the log wheels. Now, the log wheels are kind of an odd cross between the accuracy of the curves and the kind of general function of the wheels. The log wheels allow me to manually define what is a shadow, what is a midtone, and what is a highlight, and then work within those manually defined regions of the tonal range. I don't do a lot of basic primary stuff with them. I tend to, like with the curves, use them for quite targeted adjustments. So we'll just quickly go over how to expose them again. It's the icon up here in the upper right of the wheels window, or the primary tools window, that says log, and here they are. Now, just below these icons, I have pivot, lower range, and upper range. And lower range starts at 0.333, so that's about a third of the way up the graph. Anything below this range will be acted on by the shadow wheel. Now, we have these 3 decimal places here. These essentially map on to the values we see in the right hand side in our scope. So for 333, anything below 333, roughly, on the scope will be impacted. Now these actually go up to 1, not 1.023, so there's a very slight difference in the way that they scale, but more or less this number here is the cutoff point on the scope. So if I go to range 0.384 for lower, and I can just click and drag, or I can type in, and then I can move the shadow wheel around, you can see that it pretty much stops being acted upon around 384, very slightly above, because again we go up to 1.023 or 1023 here, and only go up to 1 on these wheels, but it is more or less what you're doing. So I can define my lower range, and anything below the lower range is acted upon by the shadow wheel. Anything above the high range is acted upon by the highlight wheel, and anything in between the 2 ranges is acted upon by the midtone wheel. So if I put high range to, let's say, 640, 0.64, and then you can see that I'm working with only the very brightest values in the image. And then if I start moving the midtones around, you can see that the very brightest stuff on the forehead isn't touched and the shadows are left alone, but the midtones are acted upon. So I've got a problem with this image. The highlights on the actress's skin here are kind of pale and silvery looking, and these don't look too healthy. Silvery highlights on the skin can be a common problem. Generally speaking, skin highlights are not pure white, and if they are pure white, they can make an actor look a bit pallid and ill. So I want to try and fix these pale highlights on this actress's skin. And what I can do to get a good view of this is I can just use the scroll wheel to scroll in, and then I can middle click to drag it around. I can also hold Alt and hit F to expand the viewer. And now I can reposition this image so I get a good view of what I'm working on these silvery values on the actress's skin here. So I want to bring my upper range down to where we are, about to, let's say, kind of 0.65, and that's roughly good here. I'm defining these silvery values as a highlight, so now what I can do is I can add a bit of orange or warmth into these highlights, and if I push it too far you can see what we're doing. But a little bit of warmth into these highlights, and we can begin to see now how they mesh into the skin tones better. So I can add these and maybe bring these down very slightly. There we go. And now, before and after, we've gotten rid of those kind of silvery highlights on the actress's skin, and the skin is looking a lot more healthy now. Now, one of the problems we can have with overexposed skin is that the red channel can clip in the skin highlights, in which case we just want to use this wheel to kind of cool them down a little bit. Now, if I look over here, I do have some very high red values, so maybe these warm highlights are a little bit too warm at the moment. Generally speaking, the highlight rule applies to skin, but for different channels. The red part of the skin, under most circumstances, doesn't go far above 896, and you can see my highlights are a little bit high up here, so I do want to cool this down a touch. And the green part of the skin, generally speaking, doesn't go above 768. So we can bring this down a little bit more, and then I can give myself a bit more space. And there we go. I can bring myself, give myself a little bit more space just to fix these skin tones. And now these kind of silver streaks on the skin are much better integrated into the actress's other skin tones. We're going a little bit over 768, that's okay. We don't need to hit 896 for red, and the green can just go over 768 a little bit because we do have quite a bright highlight there. But this is a big improvement over now. We've got much more natural looking skin here. So that's dealing with skin highlights with the log wheels. It's something I do quite a bit of with these tools. I will show you another trick we can carry out with the log wheels that we call an undertones grade. So what I can do is I can go back to my primaries wheels, and I can add a little bit of cyan into the shadows, generally cool things down a bit. Now this isn't great because we've elevated our core blacks. They're quite blue, they're not neutral anymore, they don't give that image a kind of neutral grounding anymore. But we can keep the impact of this color cast, and we can bring our core blacks back to being neutral using the log wheels. So I'll go back to the log wheels, and I want to bring my range, my lower range, right down. I'm going to say maybe 0.90 or 0.1. That's 0.09. Let's try that. And now, what I want to do is I want to neutralize these very dark shadows. And I want to bring that up a bit more. And what I can then do is I can maintain the impact of the color cast that I've introduced, but I can keep my core blacks and my shadows neutral and black, and I can keep that kind of grounding effect they have on the image. And this is giving it a kind of modern thriller vibe, I guess, slightly cyan, slightly sickly looking. And you can see how this does begin to change the atmosphere of the shot quite a bit. Now, this doesn't look fantastic here. It's predominantly a warm shot, and trying to introduce a cool color cast into a warm shot is a losing battle because the warm and cool colors will fight with each other and it'll go kind of neutral and pasty looking. But this is just an example of this trick we can carry out using the log wheel. So I'm going to reset my wheels here and it will go back to the way it was. But that's essentially what I use the log wheels for. They are intended to grade log images with high accuracy, but I find the primary wheels are great for that anyway, and I use the log wheels in much the same way that I use the curves. So click on through to the next lecture once you're ready. Okay, we're going to look at what we call the log wheels, and they can be quite useful, but they have a very specific function and a very specific way of doing things. First, I need to expose my log wheels.